Good evening, I'm Mrs. Bolin and I am helping you review for your exam coming up, Exam 1. This is problem 3 of the published review. It says find the distance and the midpoint between 2 points, and we give you 2 points. -5, 2 is the coordinates of the first point, and -1, 1 is the coordinates for the second point. So we're being tasked to do 2 things. First, find the distance, and second, find the midpoint. It's important that when you solve problems like this that have a formula with 2 different points, that you let one be the first point and another one be the second point, and then that you're consistent. If you start mixing things around and you're not consistent, you're going to have errors. So the first thing we want to do is just decide which point is going to be point 1 and which one's going to be point 2. It does not matter if you choose -5, 2 to be point 1 and then -1, 1 to be point 2, or if we let -1, 1 be point 1 and -5, 2 be point 2. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're consistent. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to say we're going to let point 1, whoops, my computer there is giving me a little bit of challenges. There we go. Point 1 be -5, 2, and we're going to let point 2 be -1, 1. Okay, you don't have to write it down, but I'm doing that because I'm teaching on a video. As long as you know which one you're doing, it doesn't matter. So if point 1 is -5, 2, that means that x1 is going to be equal to -5, and y1 is going to be equal to +2. And over here it means that x2 is going to be equal to -1, and y2 is equal to +1. Okay? Now we know how to substitute in for our first formula. We're going to do distance first. We know what x2 equals. It equals -1. We know what x1 equals. It equals -5. We know that y2 is equal to 1, and we know that y1 is equal to +2. All we have to do is, what I could say, plug and chug. So here we go. D, which is equal for stands for distance, is going to be equal to the square root of x2, which is -1, minus x1, which is -5. And we're going to square that. We're going to add to that y2, which is 1. We're going to subtract from that y1, which is 2. And we're going to square that. We're going to carry the radical all the way over. And that is our formula with all the numbers plugged in. So now we're going to start solving. So we're going to have D, the distance between 2 points, is going to be equal to the square root. Now, the first thing I want to do is I'm going to throw in a couple extra steps. You don't have to, but I'm doing it to make sure I don't lose anybody. So we have a negative times a negative gives me a +5, and that's going to be squared, plus 1 minus 2 is going to give me a -1. So it's going to be plus -1, and that's going to be squared. Now we're going to scroll up just a little bit. And so our distance is going to be equal to -1, okay, plus 5 is equal to 4. And that's going to be squared. -1 squared is just 1. 4 squared is 16, plus 1. So we get the square root of 17. So that is the distance between those 2 points. It is the square root of 17. And we could go ahead and put that in our calculator and find out what that is equal to decimal point wise, but there's no need to. This is sufficient. That's a sufficient answer. Alrighty, so the next part of the question is find the midpoint, okay, of the 2 points. So for our midpoint, that's going to be denoted as M. So we're going to say our midpoint in this case is going to be equal to parentheses, oops, sorry about that, So we have x1 plus x2. My x1 is negative 5, so it's negative 5 plus x2, which is negative 1 divided by 2. My y-coordinate is going to be y1, which is 2, plus y2, which is 1 divided by 2. That's our setup. Now we have to do is simplify. So we have negative 5 plus a negative 1. That's going to give me a negative 6 divided by 2. And then 2 plus 1 is 3 divided by 2. Now I can simplify this one more time. Negative 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3/2. So our distance is equal to the square root of 17, and our midpoint is the point 3, and then 3/2 for the y part of the coordinate. If you have any questions, just let me know. Send me an email.